I stood on the sidewalk in front of the house I grew up in, a cold autumn wind whipping around me. The smell of burning leaves hung in the air, but all I could focus on were the 3 large black trash bags sitting by the curb. My favorite blue sweater was sticking out of a tear in one of them. I had just gotten home from a 3-day business trip, tired but happy. A moment ago, I was excited to tell my family about the biggest success of my career. Now, I just stared at my life, stuffed into garbage bags and left out for trash collection. My name is Maya, and I am 28 years old. For the last 6 years, I have been working as an architect, slowly building a name for myself. I got home late on a Thursday night, my key ready in my hand. But when I tried to put it in the lock of my family's front door, it wouldn't turn. Confused, I knocked. I could see the lights on inside. After a long moment, the door opened. My father, Tom, stood there, his face a cold, hard mask. My mother, Brenda, and my younger sister, Nina, stood behind him, looking at me not with surprise, but with annoyance. "What's going on?" I asked, a feeling of dread creeping into my stomach. "My key isn't working." My father didn't move. "That's because you don't live here anymore, Maya," he said, his voice flat and empty of all emotion. I just stared at him, sure this was some kind of sick joke. "We decided it was time for you to stand on your own 2 feet, my mother added, her voice sharp. "You're 28. It's time to grow up." My sister Nina, who is 22 and has never had a real job in her life, pushed past my father. She had a smug, satisfied smile on her face. "I need your room," she announced, as if that explained everything. "I'm launching my career as a full-time social media influencer, and I need a proper studio for my unboxings and tutorials. Your room has the best natural light." They had kicked me out of my home, my sanctuary, so my sister could film herself putting on makeup. This is the kind of moment that just breaks you. Your own family, choosing a silly dream over you, their own daughter. Have you ever had someone in your family just completely dismiss your life for something that seemed so small and unfair? I would be interested to hear how you handled it in the comments. I pointed a trembling finger towards the trash bags on the curb. "My clothes," I whispered, my voice breaking. "My books. My whole life is in those bags." My mother just shrugged, as if I were being unreasonable. "Nina needed the closet space right away for all her new designer hauls," she said. "We didn't have time to wait for you to pack. Besides, it's just stuff, Maya. You can buy more." They weren't just kicking me out, they were erasing me. My mind reeled, trying to make sense of the betrayal. I thought of the last 5 years, of living at home to save money, but also paying them over half the mortgage every single month in rent. I thought of the promotion I had turned down 2 years ago, a dream job in Chicago, because my dad had lost his job and they'd begged me to stay and help them keep the house. My rent was the only thing that had kept them from losing this very home. I had sacrificed my own future to save theirs. My father must have seen the look on my face, because he sighed and disappeared for a moment, coming back with a small cardboard box. "Look, we're not monsters," he said, handing it to me. "We saved a few of your sentimental things. Your grandmother's locket is in there." He was offering me a tiny box of my own memories as a consolation prize for stealing my home, my savings, and my trust. The cruelty of it all finally broke through my shock and turned into a cold, quiet anger. They stood in the doorway, a perfect united front, expecting me to cry, to scream, to fall apart on their perfect green lawn. But I didn't. I just stood there on the curb, the small box in my hands, and I looked at them, at the house I had saved, and I made a decision. They had made a very, very big mistake. They thought they were kicking out their poor, quiet daughter. They had forgotten that my business trip wasn't just a small meeting. It was the final approval for my firm to acquire the regional bank that held their mortgage. The story of what happens next is something you will not want to miss. If you are ready to see this family learn a very hard lesson, make sure you subscribe to this channel so you don't miss a single chapter. And please, let me know in the comments where you are watching this story from tonight. I pulled out my phone. My parents watched me, probably thinking I was calling a friend to come and get me. But I didn't call a friend. I called my boss, the CEO of my architecture firm. "Hey, David," I said, my voice as calm as a frozen lake. "Good news. The acquisition of Northwood Bank was approved. We own it now." I paused, looking directly at my father's confused face. "And I have one more thing for you. I need you to start foreclosure proceedings on the property at 125 Elm Street. Yes. Effective immediately." The sound of my voice hanging in the cold night air was followed by a thick, suffocating silence. My family just stared at me, their faces a mixture of confusion and disbelief. My father, Tom, was the first to find his voice. He let out a short, ugly laugh. "Don't be ridiculous, Maya," he scoffed, trying to regain his power. "You're an architect. You don't own a bank. Stop this pathetic bluffing and just leave." He still saw me as the little girl he could control, the daughter whose dreams were smaller than his own authority. But his smug expression froze as his phone buzzed in his pocket. Then my mother's buzzed. They both pulled them out, their eyes scanning the screens. I could see the official bank notification emails from their own phones. The first was a friendly welcome message. "Northwood Bank is pleased to announce its acquisition by the Apex Design and Development Group." The second email, which arrived a moment later, was not so friendly. The subject line was clear and brutal: urgent, notice of mortgage default and intent to foreclose. It was real. The bluff was a bombshell, and it had just landed in their laps. My mother, Brenda, was the first to break. Her hard, cruel expression crumbled into a mask of pure panic. She rushed forward, grabbing my arm. "Maya, no, please," she begged, the fake tears now very real. "We're sorry. It was a mistake. We were just trying to motivate you. We thought a little push would be good for you to finally start your own life." The excuse was so weak, so pathetic. They weren't trying to motivate me, they were trying to dispose of me. My sister Nina, however, wasn't thinking about the family or the house. She was thinking about herself. "My studio," she wailed, her voice a high-pitched whine. "What about my influencer career? My followers are expecting a tour of my new creative space this weekend. You can't do this. You're ruining my life." The complete and total selfishness of her reaction was almost breathtaking. Our family was collapsing, and all she could think about was her online fantasy world. I thought back to our childhoods, a long history of her getting what she wanted and me getting what was left over. For her 16th birthday, my parents had bought her a brand new convertible. For mine, 2 years earlier, they had told me to get a part-time job if I wanted a car. Their reason was always the same. "Nina is the creative, sensitive one, Maya," they would say. "You're the responsible one. You're strong. You can handle it." They had mistaken my strength for a tool they could use, not a weapon that could be used against them. Defeated and terrified, my father finally confessed the real reason they had kicked me out. "It wasn't just for Nina's studio. I got into some trouble, Maya," he mumbled, his eyes fixed on the ground. "Some bad investments. I owe a lot of money." He explained that he was planning to take out a second mortgage on the house to cover his debts, but he couldn't do that while my rental agreement was still active. He had to get me out so he could gamble away the very home that my money had saved. This is a whole new level of betrayal, isn't it? It wasn't just that they didn't want me. It was that they wanted to use the asset I was protecting to save themselves. What do you think is worse? Being thrown out because of favoritism, or being thrown out as part of a secret, desperate financial scheme? I'm honestly not sure which one hurts more. As if that wasn't enough, my mother added another, even more terrifying detail. "The man your father owes money to. He's not a banker, Maya," she cried, her voice dropping to a panicked whisper. "He's a dangerous person. He gave your father a deadline. We have to pay him by the end of the month, or—" She trailed off, but I could fill in the blank. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about a physical threat. A new, unknown player had just been added to the game. I listened to their pathetic excuses, their selfish whining, and their dark, desperate confessions. I looked at the trash bags on the curb, filled with everything I owned. And I felt nothing. The part of me that would have felt pity for them was gone, thrown out with my favorite blue sweater. "That sounds like a problem you should have thought of before you changed the locks," I said, my voice as cold and empty as I felt inside. "The foreclosure begins on Monday morning. The bank will contact you with a fair market offer." I turned to walk away, to leave them to the wolves they had invited into their lives. My business this morning was in New York, a world away from this small suburban street, a world where deals are made that cross continents, from here to cities like your own in Lagos. I was ready to get back to that world. But my father, in one last, desperate gasp, yelled after me, his voice cracking with terror. "You don't understand, Maya. The man I owe money to, the one who is threatening us, it's Nina's new manager. The one who is investing in her influencer career. He's connected to everything." My father's last, desperate confession hung in the cold night air. Nina's new manager. The dangerous man wasn't a distant threat from their past. He was a predator who had already been invited into their home, disguised as an opportunity. The neat, clean lines of my revenge had just been splattered with a new, messy, and dangerous complication. I had planned to walk away, to let them deal with the consequences of their own actions. But now, my selfish, foolish sister was a pawn in a game she didn't even know she was playing. I demanded a name. My parents, now completely broken and terrified, told me everything. His name is Adrian Slate. He runs a boutique talent agency that finds and develops the next generation of online stars. He had approached Nina a month ago, promising her fame and fortune. He had told my father that to make Nina a star, it required a significant investment. An investment my father, desperate to please his favorite child, had foolishly agreed to. The money he owed wasn't from a bad stock tip. It was seed money for Nina's career. My first instinct was to laugh. The irony was insane. They had kicked me out, a daughter with a real successful career, to make room for their other daughter's fake career, which was being funded by a loan shark. But the humor was quickly replaced by a cold dread. I looked at my family, at their pathetic, terrified faces, and I was torn. A huge part of me, the part they had wounded so deeply, wanted to turn my back and let them be destroyed by the monster they had welcomed in. This is the hardest part of the story for me. My family had just thrown me out like I was nothing. But now my sister, as selfish and cruel as she had been, was in real danger. What would you do? Would you walk away and say, "You made your bed, now lie in it"? Or would you step back in to help the very people who had just betrayed you? I honestly don't know what the right thing to do is. I couldn't just leave. The responsible one, the role they had forced on me my whole life, wouldn't let me. "Get inside," I told them, my voice hard. "Don't answer his calls. Don't speak to him. Don't do anything until you hear from me." They scurried back into the house like frightened mice. I got into my car, but I didn't drive away. I parked down the street, the glow of my laptop screen illuminating my face in the darkness. My revenge could wait. My investigation had just begun. I am an architect. I design buildings. But a huge part of my job is research, digging through old city plans and financial records to understand the foundation of a project. I applied that same skill to Adrian Slate. On the surface, his talent agency looked perfect. It had a glossy website, photos of happy young clients, and press releases announcing brand deals. But as I started to dig into the corporate filings, the cracks in the foundation began to appear. It reminded me of my first big project, a beautiful old building that was hiding a secret. It looked perfect from the outside, but my research uncovered a fatal flaw in its original construction, a flaw that could have brought the whole thing down. I learned then that the most dangerous problems are the ones you can't see from the surface. I was looking for the flaw in Adrian Slate's perfect facade, and I was about to find it. I found a pattern. Over the last 10 years, Adrian Slate had started 4 different media companies. Each one had attracted investors, declared bankruptcy within 2 years, and then dissolved, leaving the investors with nothing. And each time, a month later, Adrian would start a new, nearly identical company, as if nothing had happened. He wasn't a manager. He was a professional con artist. But then I found something that made my own personal betrayal feel small. In the filings for 2 of those failed companies, a familiar name was listed as a minor partner. My father. My dad wasn't just a victim who had made one bad investment. He had been Adrian Slate's partner in these schemes for years. The debt he owed was his share of the losses from their last failed venture, and Adrian was now making my father the scapegoat. My father's whole story, his whole life as a simple, honest man, was another lie in a lifetime of them. My own father was a criminal. As I sat there in my car, reeling from this new, deeper betrayal, my fingers kept digging. I pulled up the most recent corporate filing for Adrian's current company, the one managing Nina. And that's when I saw it. The final, impossible piece of the puzzle. A new primary investor had been added just last week, injecting millions of dollars into the company. The investor's name was listed. It was my boss, David, the CEO of the firm I worked for. The firm that had just acquired the bank that held my parents' mortgage. My boss was secretly in business with the very monster who was tearing my family apart. I sat in my car in the darkness, the glow of the laptop screen lighting up my face. My boss, David. My father, Tom. My sister's predator, Adrian. They were all connected. It wasn't a series of separate betrayals. It was one single tangled web of lies, and I was caught right in the middle of it. The world suddenly felt connected in the worst possible way. A secret deal made in a small Ohio town years ago was now playing out on my laptop, on a quiet suburban street, while halfway across the world in a city like Lagos, deals just as dark were surely being made. My mind raced, putting the pieces together. The foreclosure. My boss David's quick agreement to help me wasn't an act of kindness. He had his own reasons for wanting that house. The house I grew up in, 125 Elm Street, was somehow the key to this entire conspiracy. But why? What was so special about that simple, suburban home? The revenge I had started to get back at my family now seemed like a foolish, childish game. I had accidentally kicked a hornet's nest, and now I was about to get stung. I knew I couldn't trust anyone. My boss was not my ally. My father was a criminal. My sister was a pawn. I was completely and utterly alone. My only chance of survival was to get ahead of them, to figure out what they were planning before they realized that I knew. I had to get back inside that house. I needed to find the one thing they all seemed to be afraid of, the truth. So, I did something I never thought I would do. I lied. I called my parents, my voice full of fake concern and regret. "I'm so sorry," I said, the words tasting like poison in my mouth. "I was just angry. I didn't understand how much trouble you were in." I told them I would pause the foreclosure for 48 hours, to give us time to work together, and figure out a plan to deal with Adrian. They were so desperate, so terrified, that they believed me. They invited me back to the house to talk. My mind went back to my grandmother, my dad's mom, who had lived with us when I was a little girl. She used to sit on the porch and tell me stories. "This house has good bones, Maya," she would say. "It holds our family's real history in its walls." I always thought she was talking about old photo albums and happy memories. But as I drove back to the house, her words had a new, more literal, and much more sinister meaning. The history in these walls was not happy. They let me in, their faces full of a pathetic, desperate hope. They thought I was there to save them. While my father explained his side of the story, full of half-truths and excuses, I made an excuse to go down to the basement to look for some old financial papers. The basement was cold and damp, filled with the dusty remnants of our family's life. I wasn't looking for financial papers. I was looking for the beginning. It's a strange thing, to lie to your own family's faces, to pretend to be their savior when you are really just looking for a weapon to use against them. Does being in a dangerous situation like this make it okay to deceive the people you're supposed to love? I'm not sure if I'm a hero or a villain in this story anymore, and I would love to know what you think. In a dusty old box, tucked away under a stack of my childhood drawings, I found it. It was a rolled-up set of my father's old architectural blueprints. But they weren't for a building. They were for a plot of land. I unrolled them on the cold concrete floor. I recognized the layout of the streets, the shape of the properties. It was a master plan for our entire suburban neighborhood. And in the title block, under the name of the development project, were the names of the original partners from 30 years ago. There were 3 names. The first was my father, Tom. The second was a young, smiling Adrian Slate. And the third was a name I now knew all too well. My boss, David. The 3 of them, the accountant, the con artist, and the future CEO, had been the original partners who bought this farmland and developed it into the neighborhood we lived in. My father wasn't just a minor player in Adrian's scams. He was a founding partner in the deal that had made my boss rich. This new revelation was a bombshell. Why was my father a failed accountant while David was a powerful CEO? Tucked inside the rolled-up blueprints was a single, folded, yellowed piece of legal paper. It was a dissolution of partnership agreement. It stated that my father and Adrian Slate had sold their shares of the development to David for a laughably small amount of money, just before the project had become a massive success. But at the bottom, there was a handwritten note, signed by my father. It read, "He knows what we did. He's making us sell. This is the only way to make sure the evidence stays buried with the foundation." I walked up the basement stairs, the old blueprint and the faded note feeling heavy in my hand. The words written by my father 30 years ago echoed in my head. The only way to make sure the evidence stays buried with the foundation. My family was waiting for me in the living room, their faces full of a desperate hope that I had a plan to save them. I did have a plan, but it was no longer about saving them. It was about uncovering the truth, no matter how ugly it was. I laid the blueprint and the note on the coffee table in front of my father. "Explain this," I said, my voice quiet but heavy. I read his handwritten words aloud. "He knows what we did. He's making us sell." My father looked at the note, and the mask of the sad, tired victim he had been wearing finally fell away. He looked like a man who had been haunted by a ghost for 30 years, and that ghost had finally caught up to him. And then, the whole, terrible story came pouring out. He told me about the farmland, about how he, David and Adrian were young, ambitious, and desperate. The owner of the land, an old farmer named Mr. Henderson, was a stubborn man who refused to sell. He loved his farm and had promised to leave it to a children's charity in his will. He was the only thing standing in the way of their fortune. One night, the 3 of them went to the farmhouse to try and pressure him, to intimidate him into selling. An argument broke out. My father said David got angry, angrier than he had ever seen him. Mr. Henderson, an old man with a known weak heart, clutched his chest and collapsed. He died right there on his own kitchen floor. But instead of calling for help, a young, ruthless David had seen an opportunity. He had convinced my father and Adrian to cover it up. They forged a new will, buried the old one, and made it look like the old man had simply run away. A memory, cold and sharp, cut through my mind. I was a little girl, maybe 6 or 7, and it was a cold winter's night. I had asked my father if we could build a fire in the big stone fireplace. He had yelled at me with a strange, panicked anger that was far bigger than my simple request. "Never touch the fireplace, Maya," he had shouted. "The foundation there is, it's unstable." He wasn't lying. The foundation of our home, and our entire family, was deeply, horribly unstable. Now, in the living room, my father, a broken man confessing a lifetime of sins, pointed a trembling finger at that same fireplace. "It's under the hearth," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. We sealed the evidence in a metal box in the concrete before the house was even finished. The secret wasn't just a story. It was a physical thing, a cancer, buried in the very heart of our home. We had been living on top of a tomb for my entire life. This is a crime that feels almost impossible to forgive. My father didn't just lie. He helped cover up a man's death and steal his legacy. Does the fact that he was young and was pressured by my boss change anything? Is there any coming back from a secret like this? I would really like to know what you think. There was no other choice. We had to get it out. We found a sledgehammer and a crowbar in the garage. For the next hour, we took turns, smashing away at the stone and concrete of the hearth. The work was brutal, loud, and dusty. With every crack in the stone, it felt like we were cracking open the 30 years of lies our family had been built on. Finally, my father's crowbar hit something metal. It was a small, rust-proof box. With trembling hands, we pulled it out. It was heavy. My father slowly opened the lid. Inside, perfectly preserved, was a yellowed legal document. It was Mr. Henderson's real will, leaving his entire farm to the local children's home. Next to it was his old leather wallet, with his driver's license inside. This was the proof. But there was one more thing in the box. A beautiful, silver Zippo-style lighter, with a unique emblem of a soaring eagle on it. He was never without it, my father whispered. Just then, my phone rang, the sound making us all jump. It was my boss, David. His voice was calm and friendly. Just checking in on my star architect, he said. How's the family situation? The threat was clear. He was at a charity gala, he said. As he was talking, I heard a distinct metallic sound from his end of the line. Click. Click flick. The unmistakable sound of a Zippo-style lighter opening and sparking to life. It was just past 10 p.m. here. A world away, in a city like yours, another day was just beginning, but my world was ending. My boss wasn't just a part of the secret. He was carrying a trophy from his crime. The metallic click-flick of my boss's lighter echoed in my ear, a sound that traveled thousands of miles over a phone line to confirm an unspeakable truth. He wasn't just a part of the crime. He was proud of it. He was carrying a trophy from the day he helped ruin a man and bury a secret. I somehow managed to keep my voice steady, telling him everything was fine, that I would handle the family issues. I hung up the phone, my hand shaking uncontrollably. The time for investigation was over. The time for justice was now. We all stared at the metal box on the floor, the contents a testament to a 30-year-old crime. We had the proof. We had the dead man's wallet, his real will, and his signature lighter. But what do you do with proof when the man you need to use it against is one of the most powerful and respected figures in the state? Going to the local police felt like a trap. David had money, influence, and the best lawyers. He would bury us in legal fees and twist the story until we looked like the criminals. Then I looked at my phone, at my work calendar. The charity gala David had mentioned. It was tonight. In fact, it was happening right now, downtown at the Grand Imperial Hotel. A sudden, dangerous, and brilliant plan began to form in my mind. David had built his entire life on a perfect public image. The best way to destroy a man like that isn't in a quiet courtroom. It's to tear down his mask on his biggest stage, in front of everyone who admires him. I remember, just last year, attending a company awards ceremony. David was on stage, accepting a ridiculous award for business ethics and community leadership. He gave a beautiful speech about integrity, about how a person is only as good as their word. The crowd gave him a standing ovation. I remember feeling so proud to work for him. Now, the memory of his hypocritical words filled me with a cold, righteous fury. He loved the stage. Fine. I would give him one last performance. This is it, the moment you decide to stop being a victim and start fighting back, even if the odds are completely against you. It's a huge gamble. What's the biggest risk you've ever taken for something you truly believed in? Did it pay off? I need some of that brave energy right now, because we're about to walk into the lion's den with no guarantee we'll walk out. We couldn't take the whole box. We needed a single, undeniable piece of evidence. The lighter. It was the one thing that was personal, the one thing that connected David directly to Mr. Henderson. I took out my phone, made a perfect, high-resolution scan of Mr. Henderson's real will, and uploaded it to a dozen secure, anonymous cloud servers. That was our insurance policy. Then my father, his hands trembling, picked up the old silver lighter. It was our weapon. We drove downtown, a strange and silent group. My father, the repentant sinner, my mother, the terrified accomplice, and me, the daughter turned avenger. It was late on a Saturday night here on the East Coast. The rest of the world was moving on. A new day was already dawning in places like Lagos. But for us, time had stopped. We were heading towards a single moment that would decide the rest of our lives. We arrived at the hotel to a scene of flashing cameras and beautiful people in expensive clothes. At the entrance to the grand ballroom, a huge banner hung from the ceiling. On it was a smiling, handsome picture of my boss. It read, "The Children's Foundation honors David, our humanitarian of the year." The sickening irony made me want to scream. My father, using a courage I never knew he possessed, walked straight up to the security desk. "We're old friends of David's," he said, his voice surprisingly firm. "We have a special gift for him to commemorate his award." The guard, seeing our simple clothes and our determined faces, was hesitant. But my father's desperate sincerity must have convinced him, because he let us pass. We stepped into the massive, glittering ballroom. And there, on a huge stage at the far end of the room, was David. He was standing at a podium, a golden trophy in his hand, basking in the thunderous applause of 1,000 people. We started moving through the crowd, trying to get closer. We were almost to the stage when a familiar voice cut through the noise. "Maya, what in the world are you doing here?" I turned. It was my sister, Nina. She was dressed in a shimmering gown, holding her phone up on a selfie stick, a professional-grade microphone attached to it. Around her neck was a press pass that read, "Social Media Correspondent." Her eyes were wide with a mixture of shock and fury. "You can't be here," she hissed, blocking our path. "Adrian got me this gig to cover the event. You are going to ruin everything for me." My sister Nina stood in front of us like a human roadblock, her face a mask of pure, selfish anger. On the stage, just 100 feet away, David was smiling and waving to the cheering crowd, holding his golden trophy. He was in the final moments of his victory speech. We were so close, and yet the biggest obstacle in our path wasn't a team of security guards. It was my own sister. "Go home, Maya," she hissed, her voice low so only we could hear. "You're embarrassing me in front of my contacts. You are going to ruin my career." I tried to reason with her. "Nina, this is more important than your career," I pleaded, my eyes darting towards the stage. "That man is a criminal. We have proof. We have to stop him right now." But she wasn't listening. "I don't care," she whispered frantically. "Adrian got me this job. He's watching my live stream right now. All you ever do is make things difficult." To her, this wasn't about justice or family. It was about her, her brand, and her moment in the spotlight. My mind flashed back to a warm summer night when Nina was 17. She had taken our parents' car without permission, crashed it into a mailbox, and then called me in a panic. I had run to help her, and to protect her from my father's temper, I had told our parents that I was the one driving. I was grounded for the entire summer. My parents were just relieved that their perfect, popular daughter's record was still clean. I had sacrificed my freedom for her, and she hadn't even said thank you. Arguing with her now would be a waste of precious time. The crowd was beginning to stand, getting ready to give their final applause. It was now or never. So, I changed my strategy. I stopped trying to appeal to her sense of family, and I started speaking the only language she understood: social media. "You're right, Nina," I said, my voice changing, becoming excited. "This is about your brand. And I am about to give you the biggest, most explosive story of your entire life." Her angry expression faltered, replaced by a flicker of curiosity. "That man on stage, David, the humanitarian of the year?" I said quickly. "He is a monster who covered up a man's death 30 years ago to build his empire. Our father was his victim. We are about to expose him live, In front of this entire room. And your camera, I paused, letting the idea land, can be the only one in the world that gets the exclusive. Imagine the views. Nina. Imagine the followers. I could see the war in her eyes. The spoiled girl who wanted to please her new manager versus the ambitious influencer who could smell the viral moment of a lifetime. She looked at David on stage, then at the viewer count on her live stream, which was already climbing because of the drama of our hushed, frantic argument. She was standing on the edge of a choice. Could a person who has only ever thought of herself finally do something for someone else, even if it was for a selfish reason? It's a strange thing to have to bribe your own sister with fame just to do the right thing. It makes you wonder, can a person who has been selfish their whole life really change in a single moment when the stakes get high enough? I truly want to believe they can. What do you think? David was raising his trophy high, a big, fake smile plastered on his face. Thank you all, he boomed into the microphone. It was our last chance. What's it going to be, Nina? I whispered. She looked at me, her eyes full of a new, calculating light. She took a deep breath. Okay, she said. But you better make this good. She turned her phone, which was still streaming live, away from her own face and pointed it directly at the stage. That was all I needed. I started walking, my parents close behind me. We moved with a purpose, a small, determined group cutting through the crowd of fancy dresses and tuxedos. Security guards saw us and started to move in, but my father yelled, "He's my oldest friend. It's a surprise." The guards hesitated, confused, and that gave us the opening we needed. We reached the side of the stage just as David was waving his final goodbye. I didn't hesitate. I walked right up the stairs and approached the podium. The entire ballroom, 1,000 people, went completely silent. The applause died in an instant. David turned and saw me, and the color drained from his face. He was frozen in pure, abject shock. I leaned into the microphone, my voice echoing through the silent, cavernous room. "Congratulations on your award, David," I said, my voice clear and cold. I held up the old, silver eagle lighter for the whole room to see. "I believe this belongs to you," I said. "Or, it used to belong to Mr. Henderson, the man whose life you destroyed." The crowd let out a collective gasp. David looked like he had just been turned to stone. And from the side of the ballroom, I could hear my sister's clear, practiced influencer voice, narrating the scene to her thousands of viewers online, her voice full of a strange, new kind of power. It was late on a Saturday night here in America, but because of her, it was already Sunday morning in places like Lagos. The whole world could be watching this happen, right now. "Well, followers," Nina said, her voice buzzing with excitement. "It looks like the real party is just getting started." The silence in the grand ballroom was a physical thing. 1,000 wealthy, powerful people held their breath, their eyes darting between me on the stage and their humanitarian of the year. David's face, which had been frozen in shock, quickly twisted into a mask of confident rage. He let out a short, dismissive laugh into the microphone. "Well," he said, his voice dripping with false charm, "it seems this young woman, a disgruntled former employee of mine, is having some kind of breakdown. I do hope she gets the help she needs." Security. He was trying to paint me as crazy, to dismiss me like he had dismissed so many others. The crowd began to murmur, confused. They looked at David, the respected philanthropist, and then at me, a strange young woman who had just crashed his party. For a terrible moment, I could feel them siding with him. His story was easier to believe. But they had forgotten about the third player on this stage. My sister, Nina. She was still standing in the crowd, her phone held high, her live stream capturing every second of the drama. Her influencer instincts, once so annoying, had now become her superpower. "You are all witnessing this live, right here on my channel," she said to her phone, her voice a professional, excited whisper. "A woman has just accused billionaire David of a terrible crime at his own award ceremony." The viewer count on her screen was exploding, climbing into the tens of thousands. It was late on a Saturday night for us, But for her viewers in places like Lagos, Nigeria, it was the middle of the day. The whole world was watching this happen in real time. I knew the lighter wasn't enough proof. I needed more. I looked out into the crowd and found my sister's eyes. I spoke clearly into the microphone. "Nina," I said, my voice echoing through the silent room. "Check the email I just sent you. And show it to everyone." Live on her stream, in front of all her viewers, Nina's eyes widened as she opened the file. "Oh my God," she said to her audience. "It's a legal document. It's the real will of a man named Henderson, leaving his farm, to the county children's home." I watched my words land like cannonballs. "That is the will that David and my father buried 30 years ago," I announced to the silent room. "They forged a new one after Mr. Henderson died in their presence, and they stole his land to build the empire that is funding this very party." The mood in the ballroom shifted instantly. The confused murmurs turned into gasps of horror. The story was no longer just a crazy accusation. It was now backed up by digital proof, broadcast for the whole world to see. My father used to tell me that the truth didn't matter. "Perception is reality, Maya," he would say. "It only matters what people believe." He had used that cynical lesson to build a life on lies. Now I was using the power of perception, amplified by my sister's silly live stream, to build a new reality for David, one based on the cold, hard truth of his crimes. The power of social media is a crazy thing, isn't it? My sister's channel, usually full of makeup tutorials, had just become the most powerful news network in the world, at least for this one moment. What's the most shocking or important thing you've ever seen happen live on the internet? I'm curious to know. The combination of the lighter, the will, and the global real-time broadcast was too much for David. He saw his perfect reputation, his carefully built legacy, being burned to the ground in a matter of minutes. He stumbled back from the podium, his face pale and sweaty, his eyes darting around the room for an escape. The hotel security guards were now looking at him not as a man to be protected, but as a potential criminal. They began to move towards the stage. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Flashes from cell phone cameras lit up the room like lightning. I stood on the stage, the microphone still in my hand, as my parents came and stood beside me. We were a strange, broken family, but in that moment, we were united. Nina was still filming, her face a mixture of terror and pure, adrenaline-fueled excitement. It was over. We had won. Justice, after 30 long years, had finally been served. But it wasn't over. Nina's phone, still streaming live to the world, began to ring with an incoming video call. The name on the screen made my blood run cold. Adrian Slate. "I should take this," Nina whispered, her eyes wide. She answered it, and Adrian's cold, furious face filled her screen, now broadcast on the giant monitors behind the stage for the entire world to see. "You foolish, foolish girls," he snarled. "This isn't over. Your father wasn't just my partner, he was my insurance." He held up a yellowed piece of paper to his camera. "This is a signed confession from your father, Tom, taking the full blame for what happened to Mr. Henderson. If you expose me, he goes to prison for murder. Your move." The triumphant roar of the crowd died in an instant, replaced by a stunned, collective gasp. On the giant screens behind the stage, Adrian Slate's cold, smiling face was a picture of pure evil. He held up the signed confession like a winning lottery ticket, and in that moment, the trap was sprung. My victory had turned to ash in my mouth. I had fought to get justice for Mr. Henderson, but the price, as Adrian had just made clear to the entire world, was my own father's life in prison. I felt like I was standing on a cliff's edge, and the ground was crumbling beneath me. I looked at my sister, Nina. Her face was pale, her phone shaking in her hand. The fun, exciting viral moment had become a horrifying public nightmare. She was no longer just a social media correspondent. She was the host of our family's execution, broadcasting it live. I thought about her viewers, the tens of thousands of people watching this unfold. It was late on a Saturday night for us in America, but for her audience in places like Lagos or London, it was a new day. The whole world was a witness to my impossible choice. My father, Tom, the man who had been a coward for 30 years, chose this moment to become a hero. He stepped forward, next to me, and faced the giant image of Adrian on the screen. His voice was shaking, but it was full of a new and terrible strength. "It's okay, Maya," he said, his voice quiet but clear enough for the microphone to pick up. "Don't let him win. Don't let either of them win. It's time I paid for my mistakes. You do what's right." He was offering to sacrifice himself, to go to prison, to finally, after all these years, do the right thing. A memory, so clear it felt like yesterday, flashed in my mind. I was a little girl, maybe 10, and my father was teaching me how to build a model of a house for a school project. "The most important part is the foundation, Maya," he had told me, guiding my hands. "If the foundation is rotten, the whole house will fall down eventually, no matter how pretty you make the walls." I now understood. He was telling me to let the rotten foundation of his past collapse, so that his children could finally build something new and strong. My mother was sobbing, begging him not to do it. My sister was staring at me, her eyes full of a new and terrified respect. And the world was waiting for my answer. This is the ultimate choice, isn't it? Justice versus mercy. The truth versus your own family. What would you do? Would you sacrifice your own father to take down a monster? I need to know what you think, because this was the hardest decision of my entire life. I looked from my father's brave, tired face to Adrian's smug, evil smile on the screen. And then I looked closer at the document he was so proudly displaying. I, the family archivist, the girl who spent her life looking at the details everyone else missed, saw something. "Nina," I said, my voice sharp and clear. "Zoom in. Use your phone. Zoom in on Dad's signature. Right now." Adrian, arrogant and sure of his victory, laughed and held the paper closer to his camera, wanting the whole world to see his trump card. And there it was. A tiny, almost invisible detail, hidden in the loop of the T in my father's signature. It was a small, perfect architect's compass rose, the symbol for true north. It was a secret mark my father had taught me to use on my own blueprints when I was a student, a tiny sign between us that meant a document was authentic and true. He had been leaving me a message, a secret clue from the past, a final act of a father protecting his daughter. A new, cold, and powerful confidence washed over me. I took the microphone from the podium. "That's a very convincing document you have there, Adrian," I said, my voice echoing through the silent ballroom, my eyes locked on his image on the screen. "A full confession. It must have been very difficult to force my father to write and sign that." I paused. "But you made one mistake. You see, that document is a forgery. And I have proof." I explained the secret mark, the architect's compass, a symbol I knew was on every single blueprint and legal document my father had ever authentically signed in his entire life. "My father is a man of details, Adrian," I said. "And you just missed the most important one." I could see the confusion and then the dawning, furious rage on Adrian's face as he realized he had been tricked. He had been so focused on the words, he had never looked at the signature. But I wasn't finished. I turned to look at the real David, who was being held by security, his face a mask of confusion. "And as for you, David," I said, my voice like ice, "the police will be very interested to know that this document proves you and Adrian were actively conspiring together to blackmail my father just this week." I looked from the monster on the screen to the monster on the stage. "It's over," I declared. "For both of you." In one single moment, the trap they had set for my father had become a cage for them both, and the whole world was a witness to it being slammed shut. The giant screen behind the stage went black as Adrian's slate, exposed and defeated, ended the video call. The ballroom erupted into a chaotic symphony of shouting reporters, flashing cell phone cameras, and the confused murmurs of 1,000 wealthy guests. David, my boss, the humanitarian of the year, stood frozen on the stage, a statue of a broken man. The security guards, no longer confused, moved in and took him by the arms. The perfect, beautiful world he had built on a foundation of lies had just crumbled to dust in front of the entire world. My sister Nina's live stream was now the most watched news broadcast on the planet. Her phone was buzzing with calls from major news networks. The story of our family's dark secret, a local American tragedy, was now a global event, being watched live on a Sunday morning in places like Lagos and Tokyo. The secret my father and his partners had tried to bury under a simple suburban house 30 years ago had just been unearthed for everyone to see. The truth, once a whisper, was now a roar. In the weeks that followed, the legal system did its work. David and Adrian, faced with the undeniable proof of the live stream and the threat of my father's full testimony, confessed to everything. They were criminals, not masterminds, and their empire of greed and fear was dismantled. And my father. He did the bravest thing of his entire life. He walked into a police station the very next day and told them the whole, ugly truth, from beginning to end. He didn't make excuses. He didn't ask for a deal. He was ready to pay for his mistakes. A few months have passed now. Life is different. My father, because of his cooperation, received a much lighter sentence. He is paying his debt to society, but more importantly, he is finally free from the secret that had been his prison for 30 years. My mother and I are talking again, slowly, carefully, like two people learning a new language. The language of honesty. And Nina. Her influencer career is bigger than ever, but it's changed. She's no longer just a girl who unboxes makeup. She's a voice, a journalist who uses her massive platform to expose other stories of injustice. She found her purpose in the middle of our chaos. And the house on Elm Street? The one they kicked me out of? The one I almost took from them in revenge? We sold it. We all agreed it could never be a home again. It was a place of secrets, a tomb for a buried truth. The foundation was rotten, and you can't build a new life on a rotten foundation. It was time to let it go, to let another family try to build happy memories within those walls. We took the money from the sale of the house, and we did the one thing that could finally make things right. I used my skills as an architect, and my father used his old connections as a developer, and we worked with the county to design and fund a brand new wing for the local children's home. We fulfilled Mr. Henderson's real will, turning the stolen land that had created so much pain into a place of hope and safety for children who needed it most. It was the only way to honor his memory. I remember my grandmother telling me that our house had good bones. I think our family has good bones, too. They were just buried under 30 years of lies and fear. Now we are slowly, carefully rebuilding. We are not the perfect, happy family from the old photographs. We are a real family, full of scars and mistakes, but we are finally, for the first time, honest. We are building a new life on a foundation of truth. My father, who is now out on probation, spends his weekends at the children's home, teaching the kids how to build models, just like he taught me. My mother volunteers in the garden there. Sometimes, I go with them. We don't talk about the past much. We just work, side by side, building something new, something good, something that will last. We are all architects now, designing our own second chances. My story started with a locked door, with being thrown out into the cold. But it ended with my family and I finding a new door, a better one, and learning how to walk through it together. Thank you so much for being on this journey with me. If you believe that even the most broken things can be rebuilt, and that the truth is the only foundation worth building on, please give this video a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more stories of justice and new beginnings. Thank you for watching.